And Sam is, as you may know, also from the University of Sheffield, a USS negotiator. And I'm not sure if you have slides, Sam, or not. So I'm just going to hand over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, no slides today. I think Jackie might have some in a minute, so don't worry, you'll get some slides, just not from me. Right, yeah, so I've got 5 minutes to tell you what's happening. So I'm guessing most of you know that you're looking at large cuts to your future pension accrual by virtue of proposals from Universities UK to modify the benefits in the scheme. If you want some kind of scale, UCU said when these cuts were first announced that they would lead to around a 35% reduction in your future guaranteed benefit accrual. So that's the defined benefit part of the scheme. And that if you included some of the defined contribution, if you include the defined contribution that makes up some of that loss, that it would still be a cut of 20-something% to your benefits. These will, of course, hit early career people the hardest because those who are close to retirement, all their past benefits are protected, and so really the further you are from the retirement, the more this hits you. So this is really an attack on the youngest members of university staff. Now, the reason for these cuts is, of course, a valuation, and that valuation was conducted at just about the worst possible date in the last few years. That was around 2 weeks into the first lockdown, or maybe even a week into the first lockdown, 31st of March 2020. At that point, markets had crashed, and the scheme had lost around 8 billion, 7 or 8 billion in the value of its assets as compared to the end of the previous year. Also, not only have USS conducted the valuation at a low point for the assets, they've also projected asset growth at almost 0% real. In other words, no real growth in their assets for the remainder of the life of the scheme. Okay, slightly over. I think it was perhaps actually 0.2% above inflation. But when you compare that projection to what's actually happened to asset growth over the last 20 years or so, it's quite eye-watering how out of kilter this projection is. So you put all that together and you find a big hole in the scheme, a projected hole in the scheme, and the need for large cuts to bring costs down, or that's the line that USS have given. Now, Universities UK are who we negotiate with over pensions. They represent the employers. For a while, we were working constructively with them. When there was no valuation in sight and we could talk about methodology and the abstract, stuff like that, we made some good progress. They came round to our way of thinking on valuation methodology. Problem was, USS announced the outcome from their 2020 valuation. UUK wrote back saying, we don't like this valuation, we encourage you to review it. They used some terms like unjustified or disproportionate or something. I forget precisely what their phrasing was. All it took was USS to write back saying, no, we're not prepared to revisit our valuation. And at that point, from then on, we very swiftly fell out with Universities UK. They announced cuts. They decided the path of least resistance was to cut benefits. They took an extremely hardline approach to negotiation. They didn't move an inch. It's been characterised by Mike Otsuka and others as a no detriment approach to the negotiations. They not only were unwilling to move on their negotiations, but they also undercut and scuppered UCU's proposals for an alternative way to deal with the 2020 valuation. We costed some benefit changes, which would have been cuts that our members might have only just lived with in exchange for much higher contributions from members, much higher contributions from employers, lower contributions from members, and protecting the inflationary aspect of the benefits. But our proposals that we tabled at the Joint Negotiating Committee were undercut by Universities UK saying that they would not provide for those benefits the support to the scheme that they would provide to their own, and that priced the benefits totally out of reach. They've even, if we're carrying on with how badly UUK have acted, they've totally misrepresented the scale of the cuts that they are proposing. They've done this publicly, which you might expect. Interestingly, they've also done it in emails to vice chancellors, private emails to vice chancellors. So there's an element of UUK misleading the VCs as to the scale of the cuts that are being made in their name. Okay, I think I need to finish shortly. Our demands are that UUK revoke the cuts. If they do so, we retain current benefits for a price that increases at 6-month intervals. In the first instance, this would be going up to 11% contributions for members from April, and then again up in October. If members can live with 11% for 6 months, it might give time to come up with a new valuation and a better resolution. So the second aspect of our demands of employers is that they join us calling for a new valuation. There's legal action, which I'm happy to answer questions over, that I think is interesting and could possibly provide progress on this long-running dispute. But yeah, that will have to wait for questions.